and welcome to Moneylife. Today I want to talk about an issue that ought to have actually been a matter of great concern to everybody who has been trading in the markets over the last 25 years, but surprisingly has got very little traction or discussion in the media space. And this is a default by a broker called Allied Financial Services, who had a clearing account with IL&FS Securities, which was blocked. And as a result of this blockage, whole bunch of people who traded with this broker Allied as well as with IL&FS Securities suddenly found themselves closed out of the systems and blocked from trading. Now, this is like an earthquake in a modern trading system, because I've been covering the market for over 34 years, in fact, less now than I used to earlier. And when India moved to an order-based, automated, transparent, single-screen trading system in the 90s, the promise that was made was that there would be no counterparty risk. For those of you who probably weren't even born at that time, in the earlier days when there used to be physical trading, open outcry trading, and manual settlements, at that time, because of signature mismatches, frequent broker defaults. In fact, I remember there was a time when a major broker used to default almost every month. And every one of his clients and those who traded with him would be in a soup and, be in serious financial trouble. The promise of the modern system was that there will be a trade guarantee fund, there will be no counterparty risk, which means that I don't have a choice. I operate on a trading machine, it's a single screen, and I don't know who my order is going to be matched with, right? Which means that if something goes wrong, I don't know who my counterparty is, I don't know who I've traded with, and there has to be a level of security that's offered. So this came from a trade guarantee fund, but that's not all. All kinds of checks and balances were built into the system, reporting requirements, net worth requirements, margins. The margins were automated. There's a whole system that worked to ensure there are no defaults. And when there is a default, there is a counterparty risk being taken care of by a trade guarantee fund. None of this has worked. This problem is going on since about Jan this year, Jan or Feb. And believe it or not, it's not that the regulator doesn't know. The regulator has passed an ex parte order. The regulator has been taken to the Securities Appellate Tribunal. The tribunal has again discussed whether the National Clearing Corporation, which belongs to the NSE, has the powers to look at it, or does SEBI have the powers? Are they all empowered? You must remember that the Securities and Exchange Board of India, which is our market regulator, is today on paper the most powerful regulator in the world. It has all the powers: search, seizure, look at documents, conduct forensic audits. All that is happening on this issue, however, is ping pong. So NSCL says it doesn't have the powers. NSE does some kind of forensic audit, submits it to SEBI. SEBI does an ex parte order. Why an ex parte order? God alone knows. But it now has landed up for the second time in the Supreme Court. So it went once to the Supreme Court to look at who should be looking at it. Now it's come back, and there's going to be a hearing on the 26th. Before that, two other things have happened which have provoked me to look at this issue 6 months later. You would wonder why I'm doing this column so late. This video blog is being done today because we actually got access to documents about IL&FS Securities. As you know, IL&FS Securities is one of the 348 companies that belongs to this big conglomerate that has gone almost belly up, and this is under a resolution process. So forensic audit by Grant Thornton was done. Grant Thornton's project Securities has been doing a brilliant job on the IL&FS companies, but unfortunately, this one has been rather disappointing. Why is it disappointing? Not because Grant Thornton hasn't done a good job or doesn't know how to do its work, because I believe it wasn't given a proper brief on what it should look for. Now, let me begin by telling you what the issue is. So what happens is, sometime on between Jan 28th and 30th, there is a complaint filed by 3 companies saying that Allied Financial Services, whose promoter is Dr. Avnish Mishra, has taken away securities and mutual fund units from the demat accounts of these 3 companies. And the amount is huge. It's 344 crore. So the reaction is obviously an investigation. The broker is shut down and the NSE begins to investigate. SEBI does an ex parte order, like I said. Now, who are these three companies? They are three investment companies which are all ultimately linked to a leading industrialist, Mr. Puneet Dalmia, who's also the promoter of Dalmia Cement and Odisha Cement. He's big time. Now, because the complaint has come from someone big and this huge amount of money just went out of the system, it created shockwaves. Everybody who has ever traded wondered how safe are their securities? How can a broker just take away securities from the trading account? And this is what I mean, that when there's something as serious as this happening, finally the clearing court member, which is IL&FS Securities, had the account of the broker Allied Financial and it couldn't pay. So it's taken a long time before this came to a situation recently where they closed out people who were dealing with IL&FS Securities, which is one of the, this bankrupt group is having to spend all its time hiring lawyers and appearing before multiple forums like the SAT, the Supreme Court. Why? Because SEBI is not willing to do the job it's supposed to do, which is why it's been set up as a specialized regulator. So what happens here is that Puneet Dalmia, being a big and reputed industrialist, probably got the benefit of doubt. Dr. Avnish Mishra had ex parte orders against him. I have been sending messages to Mr. Dalmia asking him for his side of what happened, but all he did is point me to whatever was told to the stock exchange. And to the stock exchange, they said that they had been cheated and the money disappeared from their accounts. These are three investment companies. I'm going to come to the names later. Dr. Avnish Mishra surprised us by walking to our office with a fat folder of a whole bunch of documents, not just of the three complainant companies, but a completely different story. Now, whose story is correct has to be looked at by the regulator. I'm going to talk about both sides. So, Mishra's story is that Puneet Dalmia talked to him. Puneet Dalmia knows everything that's happening, and that he is the one who actually introduced him to do these deep in the money options, which actually bet on the Nifty falling dramatically and which allowed Mr. Mishra to collect a premium of a massive 380 crore upfront. I'm not going to get into the technicalities of what options and futures trading is because that's not the brief of this video blog. What I'm talking about is where does the buck stop? Where does it start? So according to Mr. Dalmia, Mr. Mishra has forged documents, fudged accounts, signed fake DP slips, and cheated three investment companies that belong to his group of units, which ultimately actually belong to the listed entities. Mishra has a different story. Mishra says that the promoter wanted to use what he calls his dead assets, which are promoter shares and units, and find a way to get them to earn some money for him. And he's the one who first introduced them to Axis Securities. Axis Securities refused to accept OCL Investments, which is an unlisted company, as collateral for the trading in the market. Remember, these are huge trades. So unless you have humongous collateral, which is in the form of shares or cash, which is deposited with the clearing corporation or the National Stock Exchange, you can't conduct these trades. Now, what happens here is that the collateral offered were shares and mutual fund units that belong to these investment companies. According to Mishra, all this was done knowing full well that these are the units that would be offered as collateral. So Axis Bank refused to accept it. So they closed down that demat account, opened an account with IL&FS Securities, which is much more amenable, he says, which accepted some of this dodgy collateral, if you ask me. How did this happen should have been the forensic audit that was done. So now let's come to the forensic audit done by Grant Thornton. Grant Thornton was commissioned by IL&FS to look at what this is, because this is, it's like a scam within a scam. So you have the whole IL&FS thing, which has collapsed. Within that, there's IL&FS Securities, which has this big problem, not just of the numbers. We're not talking about 344 crore or 380 crore that Dr. Mishra is supposed to have got. We're talking about what it has done to the market, because the whole counterparty guarantee structure has failed. So this is a larger issue that is just blown up. which nobody seems to be willing to tackle. What did Grant Thornton do? It studied the WhatsApp messages, email messages of a bunch of senior IL&FS securities officers. It looked at whatever they found, including some messages from Mr. Mishra. It found some significant wrongdoing. I'm not saying that it did nothing, but that, if you ask me, is more procedural. It is serious. It needs to be tackled. So I'm going to quickly run through what is it that they found. One of the things that they found is KYC problems. So for instance, something unbelievable, which is apparently the financial statements submitted for KYC to IL&FS Securities had a different chartered accountant and a different capital structure than what was submitted or has been posted on the MCA website, which is MCA 21. According to Grant Thornton, this should have been checked. I honestly don't know whether anybody checks this when, I haven't even known that there can be a problem like this. People usually sign it and self-attest it, and it's accepted. Whether everybody checks these documents against MCA 21, I don't know, but Grant Thornton says it should have been done. Is it serious? Yes, it's serious. Doesn't touch upon the fraud at all. Another stunning thing is the financial statements submitted as KYC documents apparently was audited by a different CA, one Mr. Naveed Kumar Garg, and those that were submitted that are actually posted on the MCA website has Anil Kumar Jain as the chartered accountant and auditor. How does this happen? Stunning. It tells you a little bit about what Allied Financial is. And let me tell you that, funnily, even Dr. Mishra doesn't claim to be clean as driven snow. He does admit there are issues, and these are issues that ought to be handled, investigated, and punished. So not holding any brief for him. On 7th February, Allied's promoter sent an email to somebody at IL&FS, one Mr. Hans Prakash and two others, wanting 7 days' time to bring in additional collateral of 500 crore. Remember, he's taken a premium of 380 crores on this big punt that he has had, a deep money option. He's going to bring in 500 crore. Now, he apparently offered the shares of three companies, OCL Private Limited, Dalmia Cement East, and Navjoy Emporium of Calcutta. These three are the original complainants who had complained to IL&FS Securities that money had vanished from their demat accounts. And they made these complaints between 28th and 30th of Jan. Okay, so these are the three Dalmia investment companies. Just remember that. There's no point in me coming back to names again and again. It will just cause confusion. So he had access apparently to the units of these companies and he offered it. Now, according to Grant Thornton, this indicates that the units actually belong to the three companies. Again, Mishra is not denying it. He says, whatever I did along with Mr. Dalmia. He knew all about it. Mr. Dalmia very vehemently and strongly denies all of this and accuses the broker of forging, falsification, lying, whatever else. There's one difference here. But let me complete what Grant Thornton has said. It says that Allied has been caught withdrawing and bringing back collateral running into hundreds of crores, sometimes 2 days later, sometimes the same day, sometimes in the morning, coming back in the evening. It once withdrew 738 crore, then it withdrew 243 crore and brought it back the same day, another time 102 crore. Significant. What does it have to do with this? What kind of wrongdoing does it indicate? No idea. It only shows that IL&FS Securities was probably not being managed as well as it should. There was another instance when they extended intraday benefits without collateral to Allied. Did that particular case create a problem, or is this something that was discretionarily done? How much of discretion should these employees have shown? So again, like I said, it's not wrong, it's procedural. They sometimes increased margin limits without corresponding collateral. They sometimes supposed to have given wrong information to the stock exchange. Now that, according to me, is serious. If they say what kind of wrong information was given and what was the serious implication of that wrong information. Was it small procedural stuff, or was it something that points to large-scale fraudulence, malfeasance and fraud? GT doesn't go into it. So to my mind, if it was serious, the Grant Thornton audit would have gone into it. It hasn't looked at it. So like I come back to it, they provide incorrect data to exchanges is bad, but it is again procedural. So let's keep that aside. When I said disappointing audit, this is what I meant. When you talk, as I did, to Mr. Puneet Dalmia and to Dr. Avnish Mishra, the question that comes up is very simple. Did they work together? There is wrongdoing, there's no doubt about it. Did they work together? How much did both know? Mishra says he worked with him. Dalmia says no. But there is a long history of transactions. In fact, Mr. Mishra of Allied says how he has paid out 101 crore. Mr. Dalmia says that's nothing to do with this particular transaction that was in the past. But they have a record and a history. Someone needs to sit down, put the dates together, match them up, investigate. Whose job is that? SEBI's. Instead, SEBI has an ex parte order. I mean, how on earth can this happen when it's creating a market wide issue? Now, let's come back to what happens with Mishra. He is in the Supreme Court. IL&FS is in the Supreme Court. SEBI is part of the case. Mr. Mishra has sent us a document against objections filed in the Supreme Court where he has put in writing a very detailed account starting with who introduced Mr. Puneet Dalmia to him, and he has named names. He has named a former senior income tax appellate or settlement commission official as having been the person who introduced him. There's a lot of detail out there. And he's also talked about this Access Securities account where they closed it because the collateral wasn't good enough, how they went to IL&FS, Securities. Strangely, GT hasn't asked any of these questions. In fact, what they should have been looking for in the emails and the documents is any link to the three Dalmia companies, the introducer, how did they, were there any concessions made at the time of opening the account? Why did they accept this collateral, which was apparently unacceptable to Access Securities? None of these things have been looked at precisely because the brief wasn't correctly given to Grant Thornton. In any case, this is not the job of a forensic auditor of IL&FS Securities because you have multiple regulators looking at it. So look at the first level of regulator. So there is the National Securities Depository where Mr. Dalmia says the depository slips to be able to take the money out. There's a booklet that you sign, signatures on it were forged. NSDL should be able to come forward and say very easily, was it forged? Now, Avnish Mishra says he got a forensic expert to confirm the signatures. Mr. Dalmia says he can bring any expert and confirm anything. What is the validity of it? I agree. But NSDL should have done that job. NSDL is silent. Okay. Now, none of this is a concern for us. It should have remained with the investigators. Why are we discussing this? Because you've created a market-wide problem. There is a failed trade, there is a failed counterparty guarantee, and that has embarrassed the Indian capital market. This NSE is supposed to be the third largest exchange. There have to be questions asked globally, but apparently there are no questions being asked even nationally. So NSDL should be answering those questions about the slips and how did the money go out. Then there's the clearing corporation. It has to conduct an investigation because it's one level of regulation. Above the clearing corporation is the National Stock Exchange, which has apparently done an investigation, which it forwarded to SEBI, and SEBI's order is based on that. Now, Mr. Mishra says, again, this is like a believe it or not scenario, that he has repeatedly gone to SEBI and asked for a hearing and asked for an opportunity to submit documents, and he was not allowed to do it. I mean, how does the system work? So they all trot off to the Securities Appellate Tribunal, which hears things, then passes it back. It rules on things like whether NSCCL, which is the National Clearing Corporation, has powers or not, whether SEBI has powers or not. They go to the Supreme Court, then they come back. I think this is such a disservice to the capital market. I think something is very, very fishy out here. You need not just investigations by the police, you need investigations by experts. The expert, in my opinion, is the Securities and Exchange Board of India, and the regulator has to be held accountable for running a smooth marketplace where there is transaction guarantee, because that's what has been promised to us. I really don't care whether Mr. Dalmia or Allied Financial is right or wrong. If both are wrong, punish them, get the system to function smoothly, because you owe it to everybody, Indian, foreigner, domestic, individual, institutional, who depends on this anonymous order match trading system without asking who's on the other side of the trade, because all that is guaranteed. I think there's no time to waste. It has to be fixed. It has to be fixed fast. And we cannot allow our regulators to remain silent and let the Supreme Court decide this issue. If the Supreme Court is going to decide every issue, why on earth do we have this huge regulatory structure, a powerful SEBI, a SEBI Bhavan? Shut it all down or make the regulator do its job. Thank you.